In the annals of ufology, one of the most durable legends over the decades has been the story of President Eisenhower's incredible contact with extraterrestrials. I personally have resisted lending credence to this tale for a long time. However, in light of our nation's dangerous drift away from constitutional goals and values, I fear the time has come to re-examine the veracity and implications of what may have covertly influenced our national leadership shortly after the Second World War. Anecdotal accounts of Ike's alleged encounter with ETs can be found in numerous UFO books, but the story remains fragmented at best. With this essay, I have tried to offer a one-stop-shop collection of these stories in order to paint a fuller picture of just what this legend entails. However, I offered the following compilation as an alternative myth to the perception of contemporary history that has been generally promoted as truth since the end of World War II. This material is shared with the disclaimer that it cannot be absolutely verified and may be viewed as clever disinformation, palpable lies, entertaining fiction, or the way things really are. Nonetheless, you may find it makes a fascinating story. In 1945, following the unconditional surrender of all military forces under both the German Third Reich and the Japanese Empire, the United States had established itself to the world as the unrivaled military power of the planet. Armed with nuclear weapons, America had the biggest stick on the playground. Yet in less than 2 years following that stirring victory, the United States was facing a national security crisis of unprecedented proportions. Beginning in July of 1947, flying machines not of this earth were found crashed in the New Mexico desert. America's vital strategic defenses had been compromised. Our nation's most highly guarded weapons installations were suddenly vulnerable. New Mexico was home to advanced atomic bomb development underway at Los Alamos. Our first Strategic Air Command bomber group, the 509th, had just gone operational at Roswell. And south of Roswell, at White Sands Missile Range, our fledgling rocket design program was underway. It was absolutely imperative for our national defense planners to determine if these crashed alien vehicles, discovered near our nation's most sensitive military installations, were the vanguard of an invading space armada. Desperate to find answers as quickly as possible, President Harry S. Truman assembled a team of his top advisors under strictest secrecy to establish some kind of defense strategy. Following the crash investigation at Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, Air Force General Nathan Twining insisted to President Truman that the alien issue was bigger than the Manhattan Project and required that it be managed on a larger scale and obviously for a longer period. They would form nothing less than a government within the government, sustaining itself from presidential administration to presidential administration regardless of whatever political party took power, and ruthlessly guarding their secrets while evaluating every new bit of information on flying saucers they received. But at the same time, they would allow disclosure of some of the most far-fetched information, whether true or not, because it would help create a climate of public attitude that would be able to accept the existence of extraterrestrial life without a general sense of panic. Given the potentially explosive situation at hand, Twining's proposal seemed the most prudent course of action for Truman to follow. Thus, an emergency ad hoc secret control group was formed, which became known as MJ-12. Members of this committee included top military commanders such as Secretary of State George C. Marshall, General Nathan Twining, head of Air Material Command, General Hoyt Vandenberg, Air Force Chief of Staff, Admiral James Forrestal, Secretary of Defense, and Vice Admiral Roscoe Hillenkotter, Chief of the fledgling CIA. The most noted scientist on the team was Dr. Vannevar Bush, Truman's head of the National Science Foundation. In a secret memorandum, Canadian government scientist Wilbert Smith revealed, in fact, that Dr. Vannevar Bush headed a small group set up to investigate UFOs, a matter which, Smith stated, is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher even than the H-bomb. However, not all of Truman's military brass accepted this heavy-handed security policy, nor were unidentified flying craft restricted to the American Southwest. During the latter months of the Pacific War, General Douglas MacArthur had amassed so many credible UFO reports that he established his own Interplanetary Phenomena Unit. In fact, MacArthur allegedly had a personal contact with extraterrestrials at Clark Airfield in the Philippines in 1945. However, when MacArthur dispatched a file containing these 2,000 reports up the chain of command to Military Intelligence Chief General William Wild Bill Donovan, the reports were completely suppressed. As a result, MacArthur censored all UFO reports throughout his Pacific Command right up until 1951, when he was personally fired by President Harry S. Truman. Yet despite this embarrassing dismissal and the top-secret gag order, General MacArthur told the New York Times in 1955, "The nations of the world will have to unite, for the next war will be an interplanetary war. The nations of the earth must someday make a common front against attack by people from other planets." In 1953, the torch was passed from Harry Truman to Dwight Eisenhower, the newly elected President of the United States. And it would be Eisenhower, former Supreme Allied Commander of military forces in Europe, who would ultimately confront the extraterrestrial challenge face to face. The newly elected president took charge of a post-war nation enjoying an era of unprecedented prosperity. Yet at the same time, the growing menace of Russian communist aggression in both Eastern Europe and Korea spurred the need for an ever-expanding American armaments industry. As a former military commander himself, Ike determined that only a vastly superior weapons defense system would hold Russia's bid for global expansion at bay. Such were the Cold War imperatives dominating Eisenhower's executive agenda in early 1954. Yet despite the burdens of office, Ike had earned a reputation as an avid golfer, so a weekend getaway to Smoke Tree Ranch Resort in Palm Springs, California in February of 1954 drew only minor attention from the press. But after the Commander-in-Chief's noticeable absence on the links, a suspicious press corps figured something was amiss. By late evening of the 20th, alarming rumors hit the wire services claiming the president had suffered some dire medical emergency, or perhaps that he had even died. To quell the mounting hysteria, Press Secretary James Hagerty summoned a hasty press conference at the Mirador Hotel, where he assured that Ike had merely popped the cap off a tooth while eating chicken, which required immediate treatment by a local dentist. Such was the cover story. However, according to the legend, Ike had in fact been escorted to nearby Muroc Air Base under strictest security for a prearranged, top-secret meeting with extraterrestrials. This event remained secret until April, when details ultimately leaked from one of the advisors present. Gerald Light, an expert in metaphysics from Los Angeles, revealed in a letter to a friend, "The report is true, devastatingly true. I had the distinct feeling the world had come to an end with fantastic realism, for I have never seen so many human beings in a state of complete collapse and confusion as they realized their own world had indeed ended. The reality of other plane aeroforms is now and forever removed from the realms of speculation and made a rather painful part of the consciousness of every responsible scientific and political group." During the 2 days visit, I saw 5 separate and distinct types of aircraft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials with the assistance of the Etherians. I have no words to express my reactions. It has finally happened. It is now a matter of history. Gerald Light stated his expectation that Eisenhower would reveal this event to the general population, but the president remained silent. Another eyewitness at Muroc was an unnamed American test pilot who told British UFO investigator Lord Clancarty that aside from viewing alien craft, President Eisenhower actually met extraterrestrials, who demonstrated their paranormal powers by making themselves invisible, causing Eisenhower considerable embarrassment. Full details of what actually took place at Muroc Airfield on February 20th, 1954 remain shrouded in mystery, but the story, pieced together from numerous anecdotal accounts, reveal that President Eisenhower faced alien beings who possessed technologies so advanced as to render all Earth defenses useless. However, these creatures assured Eisenhower that conquest was not their intention. They claimed to be representatives of a dying race from the Reticulum star system seeking to negotiate an exchange of their superior technology for human genetic material needed to revive their own faltering species. Realizing his obvious disadvantage, the president reluctantly negotiated a covert treaty with these creatures without advice or consent from the Congress or the public at large. For technology exchange, the deal provided a top-secret operations facility at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, as well as another undisclosed area in the southwest, presumably underground near Dulce, New Mexico. In trade, these aliens were granted covert, random access to the American population for genetic sampling. Individuals selected would not be harmed or retain conscious memory of harvesting procedures, and a full list of human harvest contributors would be provided to government authorities. Conveniently, a military infrastructure for managing this alien treaty was already in place, namely MJ-12. Thus, the decision was made to maintain friendly diplomatic relations with these extraterrestrials until such time as we could master technologies to challenge them on a military basis. Obviously, this enterprise could only function under absolute unremitting secrecy. Therefore, an official campaign of dour ridicule and denial regarding the UFO issue was launched. It is interesting to note that another advisor allegedly present at the 1954 Muroc encounter was Edwin Norris, consultant to the Brookings Institution. And it was the Brookings Institution that 6 years later filed a report for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration recommending that any discovery of extraterrestrial life resulting from our manned spaceflights be withheld from public disclosure. The report reasoned that anthropological files contain examples of societies sure of their place in the universe which have disintegrated when they had to associate with previously unfamiliar societies espousing different ideas and different life ways. The question remains, was this conclusion also based in part on the extreme emotional reactions of witnesses present at Eisenhower's ET contact at Muroc in 1954, just as Gerald Light reported? To gain a theological perspective of this alien contact, allegedly Catholic Bishop James McIntyre of the Los Angeles Diocese was also present at Muroc, and although all members of the Earth delegation were sworn to strictest secrecy, Bishop McIntyre recanted. Considering the awesome implications precipitated by this alien contact, the bishop felt compelled to inform the Pope in Rome of the situation at hand. Italian researcher Cristoforo Barbato claims Vatican sources confirm Bishop McIntyre's presence at the Muroc meeting. The reigning pontiff, Pius XII, thereby directed Bishop McIntyre to coordinate information regarding extraterrestrials with Vatican intelligence operations. However, shortly thereafter, aliens of Pleiadian origin established direct contact with the bishop himself as well as the Pope, with meetings at the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in Vatican City. These Pleiadians, however, cautioned that the creatures Ike met in the California desert were not to be trusted. 1 year later, in February of 1955, President Eisenhower had yet another meeting with extraterrestrials. Researcher Art Campbell reveals that a second contact occurred at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. This time, following prearranged instructions, Ike's plane, Air Force One, the Columbine 3, landed at the base runway and taxied to a deserted stretch of tarmac, where it was approached by 3 hovering saucers. One landed, and the President alone was seen leaving Air Force One and entering the saucer. 45 minutes later, Ike reappeared unharmed, but exactly what transpired in this meeting is unknown. Yet had Ike prepared for some dire consequence? Popular entertainment personality Arthur Godfrey was allegedly on board the Columbine 3 during this contact, and it was known that Godfrey and famed newscaster Edward R. Murrow both worked with National Civil Defense preparing pre-recorded messages in case of nuclear attack. Perhaps Ike was anticipating some alien reprisal, as it was becoming obvious that his treaty with the creatures from Reticulum was folly. According to Colonel Philip Corso, United States Army retiree and former advisor to the National Security Council during Eisenhower's administration, these creatures weren't benevolent alien beings who had come to enlighten human beings. They were genetically altered human automatons, cloned biological entities actually who were harvesting biological specimens on Earth for their own experimentation. As long as we were incapable of defending ourselves, we had to allow them to intrude as they wished. We had negotiated a kind of surrender with them as long as we couldn't fight them. By 1955, Eisenhower realized the treaty was a deception. Mutilated animals as well as humans were found across the United States. It was feared that lists of human abductees were incomplete and not all abductees were being returned. Obviously, public disclosure was an untenable option, likely precipitating a national panic and economic collapse. In turn, disclosure to Congress was impossible as well. Thus, monies for the enormously expensive alien-related defense projects had to come from concealed sources. Considering this impasse, MJ-12, in concert with the CIA, devised a black ops, illegal drug pipeline into America via offshore Texas oil rigs provided by Zapata Oil Corporation's Chief Executive Officer George Herbert Walker Bush. This covert project was so successful, it spurred Bush's rise up the ranks of the CIA. Much to Eisenhower's regret, this alien treaty had spawned a combined armaments industry and intelligence service with powers superseding the authority of both the President and the Constitution, an autonomous covert government within our government to which Congress and the executive branch were now subordinate. Seeing the looming threat of this military-industrial complex, Ike warned upon leaving office in 1961,
"We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist."
It is very likely that Eisenhower's successor, John F. Kennedy, assumed office unaware of secret treaties with extraterrestrials. Although his presidency did prelude a decade obsessed with rockets and manned spaceflight, Kennedy held growing concerns about the meddlesome influence of both the CIA and the Pentagon in political issues. Kennedy expressed his misgivings to the American Newspaper Publishers Association in 1961 by stating, "There is grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. There is very little in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it." The failed invasion of Cuba, followed by the Cuban Missile Crisis, brought Kennedy into direct conflict with the CIA. As a result, he fired CIA Director Allen Dulles and promised to break the agency into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind. At some point, Kennedy discovered evidence of the clandestine alien treaty, whereby he issued an ultimatum to MJ-12 to dismantle the drug trade and that he planned to publicly reveal the alien presence. At Columbia University, just 10 days before his assassination, Kennedy stated, "The high office of the President has been used to foment a plot against the American people. Before I leave office, I must inform the citizen of his plight." On November 22, 1963, President Kennedy was shot to death in Dallas, Texas. His successor, Lyndon Johnson, ordered the Warren Commission to investigate Kennedy's murder. They determined it was the random act of a lone gunman. One of the key members of this commission was the former CIA director whom Kennedy had fired, Allen Dulles. MJ-12 and the Alien Treaty remained secret and secure. General Nathan Twining's original directive for MJ-12 remained inviolate. They would form nothing less than a government within the government, sustaining itself from presidential administration to presidential administration, regardless of whatever political party took power, and ruthlessly guarding their secrets while evaluating every new bit of information on flying saucers they received. Such is the legend of Eisenhower's alien contact. But is this story really a myth? Over the decades since Kennedy's death, illegal drug use has reached epidemic proportion. Alien abductions and cattle mutilations are common cliches. Notorious Area 51, the not-so-secret military base, is synonymous with UFOs and classified aircraft. George Bush rose to the directorship of the CIA and eventually the presidency of the United States, to be followed by his son as well, both of whom expanded American militarism abroad and oppressive domestic surveillance at home. After all these years, if an agency such as MJ-12 actually exists, whom does it now serve? The security and the protection of the American people as it was intended? Or has it been perverted into an instrument for clandestine, alien control of the human population of this planet? The dark side of this myth suggests the unthinkable. Does the inexorable drift toward a monolithic one-world government ruling a microchipped population serve the ambitions of unseen architects? Was Eisenhower's alien treaty actually a Trojan horse? By playing upon humanity's foolish lust for military power and control, have these clever aliens duped humans into serving as witless accomplices to their own enslavement? Humanity is not about to be invaded. Humanity is not in the middle of an invasion. Humanity has been invaded, and the invasion is nearly in its final stages. Great invasions do not happen with thundering smoke and nuclear weaponry. That is the mark of an immature society. Great invasions happen in secrecy. Perhaps the only hope for mankind's ultimate liberation lies in these secrets being finally revealed.